we're going to talk about what is a new moon. We're going to talk about working in general, my approach to working with new moon energy. I'll introduce you to the concept of the lunar keys. We'll talk a little bit about altar building and intention setting with the moon. And then I just want to share some thoughts that I have about this particular new moon in Leo that's coming up in the wee hours of Wednesday morning. I think for most of us, it's the wee hours of Wednesday. And how we can work with those very, very exciting energies of that Leo new moon square Uranus. So that's what we're going to do today. So what is a new moon? And I know that we run the gamut here. I know that I'm talking to some very seasoned and experienced astrologers, but I always try to make these calls really accessible for people who are just jumping in, astro curious, and beginning their journey of working with the moon. So a new moon, as many of you will know, is that moment in the lunar month when the moon comes into conjunction with the sun. So think about the sun taking her slow journey of 12 months all the way through the zodiac. That's actually the Earth's journey, as we know. But in astrology, we think of it as the sun's journey through the zodiac. It takes 12 months. So little fast moon is running around and will cover that same territory 12 times a year. So she laps the sun 12 times in the solar year. And each time she comes back into the arms of the sun, conjunct the sun, her apparent phase is invisible. It's the new moon. She's being embraced by the sun. And this is what we see with with the inner planets, is when they disappear from the sky, we know that they are in the embrace of the sun. So it's a sun-moon conjunction. It's a reset. It's a rebirth. So throughout the lunar month, those 29 days, the moon moves out away from the sun and comes back into the embrace of the sun. And when she comes into that inner sanctum of the sun, she's renewed and reborn. And the ancients thought of this as a time of burning off all of, in the rays of the sun, any of the unwanted things that are picked up during that last cycle get to be burned off in this intimate and sacred visit between the moon and the sun every month. So as we watch her disappear from our view in the sky, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, shrinking into that little silver sliver and finally disappearing, we know that she's taking that sacred time to come into her monthly meeting with the sun and to emerge from that meeting reborn, renewed. I like to think of them, and you know, if you've been in a live workshop, I always have us enact this, and somebody plays the moon and somebody plays the sun, and we walk around the circle of people in a circle. That really gives you the idea of the moon and the sun sitting together and whispering secrets and looking out at the zodiac, looking out at the world from the same perspective. If you think about halfway through the cycle, we have the full moon. That's the moon and sun sitting across from each other. They have very different perspectives. They're in different signs with different outlooks. But when the moon comes back to the sun, they meet together at the same degree of the same sign, and they're seeing the world in the same way and whispering secrets together and planning our month for us. So that's how I conceive of that sun-moon conjunction that happens every month and brings us the new moon. So how do we want to work with that energy? I'm very, very happy to see it becoming more available to us in popular culture, this idea of working with the moon phases, and there being lots of different moon planners that are available to us. And it's kind of come into the popular consciousness, this idea of setting intentions with the new moon. And I always set my intentions with the new moon. I think that there's a lot to be said for this, that we do want to harness that energy of rebirth and growth and use that time to contemplate our goals, think a little bit about goal setting and what we want to create over the next month. Here's one of the airplanes. We think about not only what we want to create over the next month, but over the next 2.5 years, because every new moon initiates a new 2.5-year cycle, as well as a new monthly cycle. So there is that more active process of engaging in goal setting and intention setting. And we like to do that around the house in our chart that will be affected, and we'll look at that a bit later in the call. We like to do that around the energy or the archetype of the sign that the sun and the moon are in. So that's all really great new moon work. And again, I'll talk in a little bit about how to do that. But I think that there's this more important work that comes before that, that honors the true nature of the dark of the moon. Is that is what the new moon is. It's this mysterious ending and beginning. When the sky is completely dark and we really don't know what it is that's being conceived for the next cycle. We like to think that we know what's going to happen. We like to think that if we set our intentions, we can have conscious ego control over how life unfolds. And we all know that's not actually the case. We can co-create with these energies. But I think in order to do that, we not only have to set our conscious willed intentions, which is a great use of our solar energy. Remember, it's the sun and moon coming together. So our solar energy gets to be conscious, willful, and intentional in service to our spirits. But our lunar energy wants to be quiet, receptive, intuitive, and powerful in that way. So as the sun and moon come together, we want our own solar and lunar energies to come together. So we set our intentions, solar goals. What do I want to create in the world? What do I want to manifest and bring in? But what about working with the lunar energy? What about sitting in a place of not knowing? So here's where we come to this idea of the lunar keys. I have created a set of questions for contemplation, 8 of them, one to go with each of the phases of the moon. And the questions are designed to bring you back into that state of more lunar consciousness, into an intuitive and regenerative space that the moon offers us. And the lunar key question for the new moon is, what is being conceived? Now, it sounds simple enough, like, sure, isn't that the same as setting intentions? But think for a minute about how that question is phrased. It's not, what do I want to conceive this cycle? It is what is being conceived. This opens us up to think about, not even to think about, but to feel into what may be rising up within us, what may be beginning to show itself in our lives. What are we just opening to that we may not be fully aware of yet? What are the new beginnings that we need to get really quiet and really intentional and really intuitive in order to feel? So that can be really important pre-work before setting our intentions. Just coming into that quiet space and asking, what is being conceived? What am I noticing right now in my life that's new? What does that new energy feel like? What are the new desires and impulses that are just these tiny things that are popping up in the back of my mind? What are some new experiences or people that have come in that have offered me new ideas? And just noticing, not worrying about defining any of that yet. If any of you have physically conceived a child and subsequently given birth, you know intimately this process of conception, which may happen without our even knowing it, and then growing awareness. But it isn't till we give birth, which is kind of the equivalent of the full moon, right, that we know exactly who it is that we've conceived. And I think of this with the things that we begin in our lives too. When we begin them, sometimes we just have no idea. We have no idea exactly who they are, exactly what that idea is or what it will bring into our lives. We know that it's something powerful and new that's beginning, but we may not have a full sense of it yet. So what is being conceived, I think, will take you to some really interesting places in your new moon contemplations. And from there, you can set more informed intentions, right? I think both the lunar and the solar process are really important. So how do we do that? How do we take that contemplative time? How do we take time out of our busy days? How do we set ourselves up to be able to touch into both lunar and solar consciousness around the new moon? So here's something that most of you probably already know about me, which is I believe in kitchen magic. So I'm all about the magical and woo-woo practices, but I have 4 practical planets in Taurus. So I like things to be practical, workable, doable, down to earth. So in the ceremonial and magical workings that I do around the planets and the moon, I like to work really simply with what I have on hand. And really the essence of kitchen magic is about honoring the sacredness of our daily life, knowing that we don't have to create something special or go out into the world and get something special, that the things that surround us are already sacred and the ordinary actions of our daily life are already sacred. So I do a really simple process of altar building, which if you've been hanging out with me for a while, you're already familiar with. But it's a beautiful practice for the new moon to kind of figure out what's going on for you with the cycle. So it's really just about creating a simple sacred space, and not only creating the space, but taking the time to intentionally, really just creatively communicate with yourself. So a simple new moon altar can just contain 5 things. Something for each of the 4 elements, something earth, something air, something fire, something water, and then something for the moon, the center, the sacred center of yourself. So it can be a candle at the center, and then a shell for water or a little dish of water, a crystal, or even just a plain stone from your garden for earth, a little tea light for fire, and a feather or a little image of a bird for air. Those are just suggestions. Really, you apply your creativity to it. And what I imagine you doing as you're creating your little moon altar is just moving around in your world, in your garden, around your home. Maybe if you're really excited to get something new, yes, you go venture out into the world and shop for something. But I encourage you to just look around your ordinary world. Find the perfect, beautiful little dish in your kitchen or sideboard. Cut a rose in your garden. You can even pour a little bit of that special sea salt into a dish to represent earth, and just light a candle that you have on hand. And you probably, because you're on this call, I know that you probably already have some sacred objects around your home, some things that represent spirit to you, that are something small that you can place on a windowsill or on a tray. You probably have a moonstone or some beautiful image of the moon that you can use as center, or an image of a favorite deity, or an oracle card that has a beautiful image on it that you want to connect with for this moon. So that's Bronwyn's simple kitchen magic altar. Again, if you've been around me for a while, you've probably built like 10 of these already. And if you have, I'd love to hear in the comments. But also, if you have, did you realize as you were doing that process that it really isn't about the little place that you create? It's about where you go in your mind as you're gathering the objects, where your spirit goes as you're gathering those objects and putting them together. It prepares us to bring our ordinary material world together with our sacred intentions, because you're gathering things from your ordinary material world and sanctifying them, right? Making them, reminding yourself of the sacredness of them by giving them this special role to play for your new moon. One of my favorite things that I get in my inbox is that people send me pictures of their altars, their Venus altars, their moon altars, their full moon, their new moon altars. They send me pictures. I get a lot of those every month, and it gives me absolute joy to see these small collections of little objects that I might think they're beautiful, but they don't have a special connection for me because that's not my life. But I know that for that person, they've chosen each object so carefully from their surroundings. And I know that that little display has so much resonance and impact for the person who's sending me that picture. All of them are absolutely gorgeous. And just to see the variety of things that people create. So I think it's a way to tap into spirit. It's a way to tap into our creativity. And again, it's a way to honor the profound connection between our ordinary daily life and what is sacred to us. What is sacred isn't separate. This is one of the big lessons of connecting with the moon. So, and you know what else? This doesn't have to take long. You don't have to like set aside a whole afternoon to do a big moon ritual. Sometimes all I have is 15 minutes. And just that process of running around the house or in the garden and gathering things, putting them together, taking a big breath, lighting the candle can be really profound. Doesn't have to be a long period of time. It can be a really profound break from the ordinary, which is really all ceremony is. A break from ordinary life in order to honor the sacred. So what do you do once you've set up your little new moon altar? If you have time, you can sit with it for a while and sit with your journal and sit with that question, what is being conceived? And from there, again, if you have time, allow your mind to wander on what you want to create this month and over the next 2.5 years. So let me see in the comments, I'd like to hear. Have you created a moon altar? Do you have a regular new moon ceremony or practice? Have you had success with setting new moon intentions and seeing them manifest? Drop it into the comments and let me know. I would like to hear that, especially if you have had what you would consider to be success with setting those intentions and watching them manifest over time. So we've done altar building and intention setting. Let's take a little minute to talk about what's special about this upcoming new moon in Leo. Oh, this is the other piece that I wanted to share about our intention setting is we can be very intentional with this around the particulars of each new moon, because there's this beautiful developmental cycle that happens throughout the year, starting with Aries season and going on through until Pisces season, that it's so warm my glasses are falling off my face. They're just sliding off. We get to walk through that developmental journey of the zodiac from Aries, from our rebirth at Aries to our dissolution and renewal in Pisces, because we have a new moon in each of the signs consecutively throughout the year. Makes sense, right? The sun moves through each of the signs. The moon comes to meet her in that sign. And we have the new moon in Leo season. We have the new moon in Virgo season, and on it goes. So if we honor that zodiacal journey as an inner developmental cycle, we can layer that on to our intention setting. So it isn't just something totally new and disconnected each month. It's rather part of a longer process of self-reflection and self-development that we go through in companionship with the moon. So we really do take into consideration, whether you know your own chart or not, you can take into consideration the solar season and the sign that that new moon is in, and connect with that energy when you're setting your intentions. So for this new moon in Leo, you want to work with the Leo house in your chart. And if you don't know what that is, we'll figure it out in a minute for you. But you also can, if you don't know that, you can simply work with the energy of Leo. So we know that the archetype of Leo encourages us to, Leo needs to show up in deepest authenticity and shine and know that their gifts are received and seen by the world. It's not about ego or showing off. A true Leo is sharing or performing or being present for a large number of people through the natural warmth, courage, and generosity of their heart, and through the inner work that they've done to show up in authenticity. And we all have Leo somewhere in our chart. We all have that human need to be seen for who we are and to have our unique gifts validated, seen, and honored. And that's the Leo part of us. So that's what we're working on when we're working with that new moon in Leo season. We're thinking about, how can I show up in more authenticity? How can my heart be more courageous in sharing the gifts that I came into this world with? And it's a time to contemplate the places where we may be feeling sadness or lack because we feel we're not seen, or we feel there isn't room for our gifts. So it's a really profound opportunity to check in with that, check in with your authenticity, your deep values, the gifts that you give to the world, and see what the state of them is. Are you feeling really validated and satisfied with the way that you show up and share? Or do you feel a need and an ache there? Is there something that needs to be born into the world? These are some of the tender contemplations of Leo season, right? And these are some of the things that we can think about and set intentions around during the Leo new moon. So that's kind of the big psychological take on it. But you can also just set small intentions, like I'm going to finish my website this month, or that could be a Gemini season 2 thing too. But I'm thinking about, like, what is it that we need to get out into the world so that people can see us more? I just finished an everything page for my website, and there was something so Leo about that process, going back through literally everything that I offer in my astrology world and polishing it up, feeling proud of it, and sharing it with the world. It's very Leo. And there was an emotional process that went on underneath that, but it was a small practical result. So that's the Taurus in me talking too. You can make your intentions both an emotional psychological challenge and a small practical result. In fact, the best ones are both. So that gives you some ideas more generally how to work with Leo energy as we're going into this month. And that's how, even without a lot of astrology or without a lot of knowledge of your own chart, that's how you can tune into the new moon energy each month, just by tuning into the energy of that sign and thinking about how that fits with what you want to create in the world. So I see that. And when I share something like this in a call like this, for simplicity's sake, I am working with whole sign houses. So if you already know 23 Leo is in a certain house of your chart via the house system that you use, this might contradict it, and that's okay. They're just two different systems. So I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm just keeping it simple for those who don't know. And neither system is, do you notice how careful I'm being? We all know that the house system stuff can get very contentious, but I use both Placidus, which is quadrant based, and whole sign. They're both very effective house systems. So it's not like one's better. It's not like one's more sophisticated. They both serve their purposes. And for our purposes today, I'm just going to tell you what house your new moon is falling in by whole sign house. Okay, so you need to know your rising sign for this. You need to know your ascendant. If your ascendant is Aries, this is in your 5th house of children, joy, creativity, and pleasure. If you are Taurus rising, this is falling in your 4th house of home and roots. If you are a Gemini, it's falling in your Gemini ascendant. It's falling in your 3rd house of communication, siblings, learning, a house of the goddess, where the sacred comes into daily life, stuff that we're talking about. Cancer will be the 2nd house of personal income and values. That's for the Cancer ascendants. For the Leo ascendants, it's obviously the 1st house of self, identity, and body. For the Virgo ascendants, the 12th house of karma, retreat, and releasing. Libra ascendant, 11th house, group affiliations and friendships and audience. Scorpio ascendant, 10th house, career and reputation, visibility, aspirations. Sag, that's your 9th house of travel, study, and mysticism. The Sag loves that. Capricorn, that's going to be the 8th house, right? Of debt, investment, shadow work, deep ancestral work, mediumship. That's Cap rising. For the Aquarius risings, we've got the 7th house of partnership, one-on-one work, where we meet the other. And finally, if you're a Pisces ascendant, this is going to fall in your 6th house of daily life, wellness, and pets. So new moon in Leo in one of those houses, according to what you know about your chart or according to that list that I just gave you. And does anybody know what the distinguishing feature or one of the most important distinguishing features of this moon that's coming up on Wednesday is? What would you say is the most significant aspect that you see to this moon? The square Uranus, that's what I think is really significant. Conjunct Venus, of course. Venus retrograde, same. Uranus. Yeah, so everybody's saying the same thing, and these are the two things that that I'm of course looking at as well. So this new moon in Leo at 23 degrees. Uranus, as I know very well because my sun is at 23 degrees of Taurus, Uranus is currently at 23 degrees of Taurus. So it will be exactly square, the new moon will be exactly squaring Uranus. There's also this really beautiful thing that's happening, which is that the moon, the sun has just recently had her conjunction with Venus. So that happened on Sunday, the Venus star point. And now she's moving to her next conjunction with the moon. So I just think it sheds this beautiful light on these few days between that Venus kiss and the new moon, where the sun is just, it's like if two of your very favorite people in the whole world came to visit you a few days apart. This is the sun meeting up with first Venus and the moon in Leo. It just seems so joyful and celebratory. But of course, there's this other really intense energy in the mix, which is the Uranian component. Now, it's really difficult to do forecasting and predictive work with Uranus because the nature of Uranus is that he brings the unexpected. Uranus, of course, is one of our outer transpersonal planets. He has a cycle of 84 years, so it just contains the average lifespan. It's really an archetype that's a little bit out there for us to grasp. When we are having a Uranus transit to a personal planet, those can be some of the times when life brings us unexpected twists. And these can be of any nature, from literally losing our minds to having fantastic windfalls. And you just never know with Uranus. What we do know is that there will be sudden, enlightening, challenging, unexpected events that leave us changed. And again, that can be, there's no judgment value with that. It's not about good or bad experiences. Uranus brings the opportunity to touch into a very powerful archetype at work in our lives, an archetype that we see across cultures of that lightning bolt of awareness. We see it in the gods and goddesses of thunder and lightning. We see it like in my own Buddhist tradition. It's the Vajra thunderbolt, this bolt of enlightenment. And I think of the tarot card, the lightning struck tower. It runs the gamut from enlightenment to alarm. So it's a lot. I think that, as always, I like to suggest practical remediations. Stay really hydrated, take salt baths. Epsom salts are really great for this. Try to really stay calm. And if unexpected things happen, I think we can try to trust that it is ultimately for our own expanding awareness that the unexpected events are coming about. I say that gently because it can be difficult, but I don't want to instill fear either, because this can be a really exciting, really beautiful and expansive moment in our lives as well. But the new moon is going to carry that Uranian energy through the entire month, and indeed through the next 2.5 years. So this is for you, especially if you have important placements between 20 and 25 of the fixed signs, so Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio, because the new moon and Uranus will be making hard aspects to those placements. Can I? Athena's sharing, I think, about her new moon altar. I practice weekly. Beautiful. It's on my calendar, and I usually take 30 to 60 minutes to set up and perform ritual. This is goals for me, this level of intentionality and commitment to your lunar practice. I really honor that. My altar isn't permanent, yes, because I don't have space. Yeah, this is why I'm always saying just build it on a little tray or something so you can move it around, dismantle it, put it back together. lunar energy is always fluctuating. So there's something sort of, a permanent lunar altar isn't really, the moon isn't ever permanently anything. So I think that our altar is always changing and moving is very appropriate for a lunar altar. So it gets tucked away after ritual. Perfect. I change out the crystals, use the same beautiful dish my daughter purchased for me in Spain. This is a practice after my own heart. And try to switch out the feather. Yes, then new ones will fall and literally fall into your lap. My centerpiece changes based on what I feel represents spirit at that time. This is beautiful. Sometimes it's sparkly jewelry or an image of a small token. I use my moon journal to document where I am to use for the later lunation and the longer cycle. This is just an exquisite lunar practice. This has all of the elements, right? The being authentic to yourself and the time and space that you have, using what's at hand, the tracking piece so that as you dip in and out of those lunar cycles, you can see how they develop over time and over that longer cycle. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's a great model for us, a great example of what can be done. Nancy says, I struggle to come up with intentions that are not just about my to-do list. You have a lot of Virgo in your chart, right? It's okay if they're about your to-do list. That's our real life. That's our real life. The moon can help us to go through our to-do list. Don't feel like that's not sacred enough. Your to-do list is sacred. It's really okay. And that said, I think I also hear an ask to kind of like, how do I drop in deeper? And that piece of using that simple lunar key question, what is being conceived, pulls you away a little bit from what do I need to do, right? So beginning with that contemplation, like just those simple things I've suggested, taking the time to create the altar and watching where your mind goes with that, and then taking the time to sit with that lunar key. It might not sound like that's going to do anything, but it will. So I'd suggest trying that, Nancy, and see if that kind of pulls your consciousness away a little bit. And then when you set the intentions, go ahead and loop in your to-do list. It's okay to be you. I like that question because I think we need to be reminded of that these are the sacred moments in our daily life. Like the 6th house is across from the 12th house. What we do with our days is what we do with our life. It creates our karma. So, right on the to-do list, my sacred to-dos. It's okay. It's all sacred. Virtually no Virgo. I think I thought you were a different Nancy. So we can't blame it on the Virgo. But my advice still stands. So that's Athena. I used to have a little table attached to the wall, and after my non-ritual on the eclipse earlier this year, which I did not set intentions on good, the whole table fell off the wall. Wow. It was quite a poignant sign to me for that particular lunation. See, this is the kind of thing that we invite in when we open ourselves by asking open-ended questions and doing open-ended ritual. I noticed that almost if I get into that zone with altar building and ritual intention setting, that there is almost always something unexpected that happens during that process. Maybe not always that dramatic, that's very eclipse season, but those are the little mercurial delights that will help us to understand what's happening. Nancy says, I use your lunar keys. Current intention is to move daily, receive healing, and consider possibility. That right there is a beautiful to-do list. Move daily, receive healing, and consider possibility. Those are beautiful intentions. So I really appreciate the sharing because I think each of you is speaking for all of us. Like it's beautiful to hear what your individual practices are and to think about how our practices can be very, very different from each other. Speaking of Leo, fall schedule is open for consultations. Okay, it's there. I have about 8 spots in September, October. So go ahead and book in on my website. We can talk about your Venus retrograde experience. We can deepen into your chart. We can work with whatever it is that's happening for you transit wise. And of course, it's my favorite, most heartfelt work to sit in the consultation space with you guys. Got lots of other things coming up in lots of fun live rounds of my classes in the fall. So keep an eye on those emails for some launches coming up in the next couple of weeks. And take really good care of yourselves under these skies. And may this new moon in Leo just bring so much beauty to your heart. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.